am Vivian Kensington, and I was rushed into the hospital for the heart transplant that saved my life. Martin Sinclair, my selfish husband, refused the $150,000. He called it a waste. Ryan Montgomery, my secret son, sold everything he owned and gave me every penny. But what happened when I confronted Martin changed everything forever. If you're loving stories of quiet strength, elegant revenge, and late justice, take a second to subscribe and stay with me. I am telling this years later, when the scent of antiseptic no longer grips my throat, but back then my life was still wrapped in silk curtains, polished marble counters, and the illusion that love could be negotiated like property. I was an interior designer in Boston, known for restoring brownstones with restraint and taste, for choosing textures that whispered rather than shouted. I believed marriages should be designed the same way. Balanced, thoughtful, durable. I was wrong. Martin Sinclair liked to call our life a portfolio. He was a real estate executive who measured everything in return on investment, including people. At dinners, he spoke of square footage and capitalization rates, the way priests speak of scripture. When I laughed too loudly, he tightened his jaw. When I asked for warmth, he called it inefficiency. I told myself all successful men were like this. I told myself love matured into silence. Our townhouse on Beacon Hill was immaculate. Cream walls, walnut floors. No photographs of us laughing. No traces of disorder. I curated spaces for strangers that felt more alive than my own home. Martin traveled often. Conferences, deals, late meetings. He smelled of unfamiliar cologne when he returned. I noticed. I always noticed. I simply did not speak. The first warning came as exhaustion. The kind that sinks into your bones and refuses to leave. I would climb the stairs and feel as though I had crossed an ocean. My hands trembled when I poured coffee. My breath shortened, like someone quietly tightening a belt around my chest. Martin said I needed discipline, less indulgence. One afternoon, while presenting fabric samples to a client, the room tilted, colors blurred, the elegant blues and creams smeared into gray. I excused myself, locked myself in a powder room, and slid down the wall, pressing my palm against my sternum, as if I could hold my heart in place. I did not call Martin, I called a car. The hospital smelled like metal and fear. Machines beeped in calm, indifferent rhythms. A young nurse with kind eyes attached wires to my chest and spoke gently, as if softness could compensate for what was coming. A cardiologist followed, then another. Words began to stack like stones: cardiomyopathy, end stage, urgent. I listened as though they were speaking about someone else. When they said transplant, the room went silent. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting tiny perforations. I had designed rooms where people began new lives. Now my own life depended on another heart, another body, another ending. I signed forms with a shaking hand. Power of attorney. Medical consent. Pages and pages that assumed someone would stand beside me. Martin arrived an hour later, impeccably dressed, irritation thinly veiled behind concern. He kissed my forehead like a businessman sealing a deal. He asked how long this would take. The doctor explained the cost. $150,000 not fully covered. Urgent, necessary, life-saving. Martin laughed, a short, dismissive sound. He said there were limits. He said assets needed liquidity. He said it was a waste to pour money into a body already failing. I watched the doctor's face harden. I watched the nurse look away. I felt something inside me break that had nothing to do with my heart. I asked him quietly if he heard what they were saying. He said he did. He said he had commitments. He said not everything could be saved. Then he left, already texting, already gone, while I lay tethered to machines that hummed like distant insects. In that moment, I understood my marriage had ended long before my heart began to fail. Night fell, the ward grew quieter. The lights dimmed. I listened to other patients cough, to footsteps echo, to my own breath rasp like torn fabric. I thought of the life I had built, the rooms I had softened, the love I had tried to earn. I wondered if this was how it ended. Alone. Measured. written off as an expense. Somewhere between fear and sleep, I remembered a letter hidden in the back of my jewelry drawer. A name I never spoke aloud. A promise I made decades ago to protect someone from a man like Martin. As my monitor beeped steadily, I realized the past was no longer behind me. It was walking toward my hospital bed, and it was about to change everything. Stay with me, because what happened next was not rescue. It was reckoning. The morning light crept into my hospital room without asking permission. Pale and sterile, revealing everything I was trying not to feel. The machines beside my bed hummed steadily, like indifferent witnesses, recording each fragile beat of my failing heart. I lay there staring at the thin line of sunlight on the floor, realizing how quiet abandonment sounds. It is not loud. It does not shout. It simply does not come. If this story is already pulling you in, if you feel the truth between the lines, subscribe now and stay with me. Some endings only make sense when you hear every step that led there. Martin did not return that morning, or the next. Nurses came and went, efficient, kind, professional. They adjusted drips, checked vitals, spoke to me gently, as if I were something that might shatter. When they asked who my emergency contact was, I said my husband. They nodded and wrote it down. No one questioned why he never appeared. Lying flat made it harder to breathe. Every inhale felt shallow, borrowed. My chest ached constantly, not sharp pain, but a deep, exhausting pressure, like grief pressing inward. At night, when the ward quieted and the televisions clicked off one by one, memories came uninvited. Not happy ones. The useful ones. The ones I had buried so I could survive my marriage. I remembered Martin standing in our kitchen years earlier, holding a glass of wine, telling me emotions were liabilities. I remembered how he mocked my softness, how he called my empathy decorative. I remembered nights I waited up for him, rehearsing conversations that never happened. The humiliation was not in his cruelty, it was in my silence. The doctors were honest with me. My condition was deteriorating quickly. Without a transplant, weeks were uncertain. Days were possible. They spoke in careful tones, but I heard the truth beneath them. I nodded, I thanked them. I was very good at being agreeable, even while dying. One afternoon, a nurse named Elaine helped me sit up. She smelled faintly of lavender and hand sanitizer. She asked if I had family. I hesitated, then said I had a husband. She smiled politely, the way people do when they know better, but say nothing. Before leaving, she placed a small envelope on my tray table. She said it had been in my belongings, marked important. The envelope was old. Cream paper, slightly yellowed at the edges. My handwriting stared back at me, steadier than I felt now. Inside was a folded letter, written decades earlier, on a night when I chose fear over honesty. I had written it to a boy I loved more than my own life, a boy I sent away to protect him from a man who would never accept him, Ryan. I had been young then, in love, pregnant, and terrified. Martin did not know. He never knew. I told myself secrecy was mercy. I told myself distance was safety. I built a life that looked respectable while leaving my heart somewhere else entirely. Now that heart was failing, and the truth I had hidden was the only thing that felt real. My hands shook as I read my own words. Promises of love, apologies, an address, a hope that one day, when it was safe, I would explain everything. Tears slid silently into my ears, dampening the pillow. I wondered where Ryan was now. If he hated me, if he remembered me at all. That night, Martin finally called. His voice was clipped, distracted. He said he was busy. He said we would talk later. He asked if the doctors were being dramatic. I told him they were not. There was a pause. Then he said we would discuss finances when things were clearer. He hung up without saying goodbye. After the call, something settled inside me. Not despair, clarity. I stopped hoping Martin would change. I stopped imagining rescue from the life I had built. I pressed the call button and asked Elaine for a pen and paper. She brought them without question. I wrote one sentence, then another. I wrote the truth I had swallowed for decades. I addressed the envelope with a name I had not spoken aloud in years. With every word, my chest hurt less. Not because my heart was healing, but because it was finally being honest. I did not know if the letter would reach him in time. I did not know if he would come. I only knew that the man who had refused my life was no longer the center of my story. And somewhere beyond the hospital walls, the son I hid was about to decide whether I deserved saving at all. I heard his footsteps before I saw his face. Heavy, uncertain, pacing just outside my room, as if he were afraid to cross the final line between past and present. The machines beside me hummed steadily, unaware that my life was about to split open in a way no surgeon ever could. I was staring at the door when it finally opened, and the man who stepped inside carried my eyes, my mouth, and the weight of every choice I had ever made. If this moment already has your heart racing, if you feel how fragile truth can be, subscribe now and stay with me. What comes next is the reason everything changed. Ryan Montgomery stood there awkwardly, hands rough and scarred. Knuckles nicked with old cuts that told stories of endurance and labor and survival. He wore worn jeans, boots dusted with oil stains, and a jacket that had seen too many winters. He looked nothing like the men in Martin's world. And yet, the moment our eyes met, recognition passed between us like a current. He knew, I knew. No test was needed. He did not rush to my bedside. He took a breath, as if steadying himself against something invisible, then said my name softly. Vivian. Hearing it from his mouth felt like hearing it for the first time. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened, emotion rising faster than my failing heart could handle. Tears slid down my temples, and Ryan crossed the room in 2 long strides, taking my hand carefully, as though afraid I might disappear. He told me he had received the letter that morning, that he had read it twice, then a 3rd time while sitting in his truck, unable to start the engine. He said he had always wondered, about his mother, about why she vanished, about why life felt like it was missing a center. He said my words answered questions he had carried quietly for decades. I apologized. Over and over. For leaving, for hiding, for choosing fear. He stopped me gently, his thumb brushing the back of my hand, in a gesture so familiar it broke me. He said he understood more than I thought. He said some people grow up early. Some learn silence as a language. He said he never hated me. He said he just wanted to know if I was alive. The doctors came in shortly after, drawn by the change in the room. Ryan stepped back but stayed close, listening as they explained my condition again. End-stage heart failure. Transplant urgently needed. $150,000 to bridge the IDS between insurance and survival. I watched Ryan's jaw tighten. I watched his eyes sharpen with a focus I recognized. Resolve. When the doctor left, Ryan sat beside me. He asked if Martin knew. I laughed, a thin, bitter sound that startled even me. I told him everything. The refusal. The word waste. The way my life had been reduced to a line item. Ryan did not raise his voice. He did not curse. He simply nodded, absorbing the truth like fuel. He told me he was a mechanic, that he owned a small shop on the outskirts of the city, that he lived modestly, that he had never been afraid of hard work. Then he told me he would handle it. I tried to protest. I told him I could not accept that kind of sacrifice. He shook his head and said some things are not sacrifices. They are corrections. Over the next 2 days, I watched him move with relentless purpose. He made calls in the hallway, voice low but firm. He sold his truck. He sold his tools. He emptied his savings account down to the last dollar. He signed papers without hesitation. When the billing office called me, stunned, to confirm payment in full, I closed my eyes and cried into the pillow, my body racked with gratitude and guilt. Ryan brought the receipt to my bedside. He did not make a speech. He simply placed it on the tray table like a fact, undeniable and final. He said I would live. He said that was all that mattered. I reached for him, pulling him into an awkward embrace around tubes and wires, breathing in the scent of oil and soap and something achingly familiar. Martin never came, not once, not even when the surgery was scheduled. He sent a text asking if everything was settled. I did not reply. I was too busy preparing to survive. The night before the transplant, Ryan stayed with me until visiting hours ended. He promised he would be there when I woke up. He promised we would talk about everything later. About the past. About the future. About what came next. As he left, he paused at the door and looked back at me with a strange, unreadable expression, as if he were holding a secret of his own. As the nurses prepped me for surgery, as they wheeled me toward the bright, blinding lights of the operating room, one thought echoed louder than the machines. Martin believed he had discarded me. He had no idea that by refusing my life, he had handed me something far more dangerous: time, and a son who knew exactly what loyalty meant. The operating room was colder than I expected, a sterile cavern flooded with white light that erased all shadows. Voices moved around me in calm, practiced rhythms, each person performing their role with precision that felt almost ceremonial. As they transferred me onto the narrow table, I caught a final glimpse of Ryan through the glass, his hands pressed together, head bowed. That image followed me as the anesthesiologist asked me to count backward, and the world folded in on itself. If you are still here, if you feel the gravity of this moment, subscribe now. The quiet turns that follow are where truth reveals itself. I drifted between sensations, pressure without pain, sound without meaning. At one point, I thought I heard music, a soft classical piece humming through the room, grounding the surgeons as they worked inside my chest. My old heart, the one that had carried secrets and compromises, was lifted away. A new one was placed carefully, deliberately, beating with a strength that did not yet belong to me. When I awoke, the first thing I noticed was sound, a steady, confident rhythm inside my ears, stronger, clearer. The second thing was light, softer now, filtered through half-closed blinds. My mouth was dry. My body felt heavy, stitched together, but alive, so unmistakably alive. I tried to move and felt a gentle pressure on my hand. Ryan was there. He looked exhausted, eyes rimmed red, beard rough with mist shaves, but when he saw my eyes open, his face broke into a smile so full it stole my breath more than the surgery ever could. He leaned close, whispering my name like a prayer. I tried to speak. He told me not to. He told me everything went well. He told me I was safe. Hours passed in fragments. Nurses checked vitals. Doctors murmured satisfaction. Tubes were adjusted. Pain ebbed and returned in waves, manageable, distant. Through it all, Ryan stayed. He read to me when my eyes were too tired. He held my hand when tremors shook me awake. He did not leave. Martin did not come. On the second day post-surgery, when I was alert enough to sit up, a nurse handed me my phone. I had dozens of messages, most from acquaintances who had heard something vague. One from Martin. Just one. It read, "Glad it worked out. Call me when you're coherent." No apology, no question, no relief. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Something shifted then. Not anger, not yet. Awareness. I began to see my marriage the way a designer sees a room stripped of furniture. The flaws were obvious. The coldness, the imbalance, the way everything had been arranged to benefit one person. And for the first time, I did not rush to fill the emptiness. Recovery was slow but steady. Each day, I walked a little farther down the corridor, for Pole rolling beside me like an awkward companion. Each day, my strength returned in increments. With it came clarity. Martin called twice more. Each time distracted. Each time impatient. He complained about schedules. About inconvenience. About money already spent elsewhere. One afternoon, while Ryan was stepping out to grab coffee, Martin arrived unannounced. He stood at the foot of my bed, surveying me like an asset that had survived depreciation. He commented on the room, on the hospital's efficiency. He asked how soon I would be home. He did not ask how I felt. I watched him carefully. His suit was expensive, new. His watch gleamed. There was a faint scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to him. He talked about a trip he needed to take. About meetings he could not cancel. About how lucky I was. Something in his tone implied debt, obligation. When he finally paused, I asked him a simple question. Where had he been when the payment was made? He blinked, momentarily thrown off script, then waved it away. He said he assumed insurance covered it. He said Ryan must have misunderstood something. He said details bored him. I nodded. I smiled. I said nothing else. But inside me, something sharp took shape. After he left, Ryan returned, his expression darkening when he saw my face. I told him Martin had been there. I told him what was said. Ryan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder he had not shown me before. Inside were bank statements, not mine, Martin's, transfers, withdrawals, payments to accounts I did not recognize. Ryan told me he had not gone looking for this at first. But when Martin refused the money so easily, something did not add up. A man who claimed restraint was living extravagantly somewhere else. A pattern had emerged: hotels, jewelry stores, rental properties, and always the same name on the receiving end. My hands shook as I held the pages. The betrayal was no longer abstract. It had dates, amounts, addresses, proof. I felt the new heart inside me beat steadily, powerfully, as if urging me to pay attention, to act. That night, as the ward dimmed and the city lights flickered beyond the window, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I was alive because of a son I had hidden. I had been dismissed by a husband I had served, and now, with evidence in my hands and time on my side, I understood something essential. Survival was only the beginning. What I did next would determine who I became. Recovery gives you time. Long, quiet hours where your body rests and your mind sharpens. My new heart beat with a confidence I had never known, steady and unafraid, as if it understood that survival alone was not enough. I spent my days walking hospital corridors, my nights replaying every moment of my marriage with a clarity that bordered on ruthless. Patterns revealed themselves when I stopped excusing them. If you're still with me, if you sense where this is going, subscribe now. The calm before reckoning is where the most dangerous plans are born. Martin did not visit again. He sent brief messages, transactional and hollow. He asked when I would be discharged. He asked if I could attend a dinner he was hosting in a few weeks. He asked nothing about pain or fear or gratitude. Each message confirmed what my heart already knew. I had been a role, not a partner, a fixture, not a priority. Ryan helped me transfer to a private recovery suite once the doctors allowed it. He handled everything quietly, efficiently, the way someone does when they are used to solving problems alone. I watched him move through my life with a care Martin never had. It was humbling. It was devastating. It was also clarifying. One afternoon, while Ryan was out handling paperwork, a nurse delivered a bag of my personal effects that had been left at the house. Inside was my phone, finally powered on after weeks of silence. I stared at it for a long moment before unlocking it, my reflection faintly visible on the dark screen. I told myself I was only checking messages. I lied. Martin had always been careless with technology. He believed privacy was something other people needed. His confidence had made him sloppy. As I scrolled, patterns emerged quickly. Deleted threads. Archived conversations. Payment notifications that did not align with his supposed restraint. I followed the trail methodically, the way I once traced architectural lines on blueprints. Photos surfaced, not intimate at first. Hotel lobbies, champagne glasses, then reflections in mirrors. A woman's hand on his sleeve. Jewelry I recognized. Jewelry he had once told me was impractical. The timestamps lined up perfectly with nights he claimed to be working late. My chest tightened, but the pain was clean. Informative. I did not cry. I cataloged. Ryan returned to find me calm, phone set neatly beside me. I told him what I had found. He nodded, unsurprised, and added what he already knew. He had pulled public records, property leases, under shell companies, short-term rentals paid in cash. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Martin was not frugal. He was selective, and I was not the selection. We worked quietly, patiently. I requested copies of joint account statements from our financial advisor, citing recovery fog and the need to feel informed. No one questioned me. For years, I had been the agreeable wife. Now that habit worked in my favor. The documents arrived, thick and thorough, detailing assets Martin assumed were beyond scrutiny. As I reviewed them, a realization settled over me. Nearly everything of value was joint. The townhouse, the investment accounts, the discretionary funds Martin treated as his own playground. He had underestimated me in one crucial way. He believed I was too gentle to notice, too tired to act. One evening, Ryan brought takeout and we ate together in my room, the city glowing beyond the windows. He asked me what I wanted to do. Not what I should do. Not what was expected. What I wanted. The question caught me off guard. I had not been asked that in decades. I told him I did not want to scream or destroy. I wanted balance restored. I wanted Martin to feel what it was like to stand in a room where the rules had changed without his consent. Ryan listened carefully, then smiled in a way that was both proud and dangerous. He said he knew exactly how to do that. The plan formed slowly, deliberately. Not revenge fueled by rage, but justice guided by precision. We would not confront Martin yet. We would prepare. We would move quietly, using the same legal structures he trusted. Trusts, accounts, authorizations, all irreversible, all perfectly legitimate. That night, alone, again, I placed my hand over my chest and felt the steady rhythm beneath my skin. This heart had been paid for with sacrifice and loyalty. It deserved a life built on truth. Martin had taken years from me without consequence. He would not take another day. The proof was gathered. The pieces were aligning. And soon, very soon, my husband would learn that the woman he dismissed as fragile had become something far more formidable. The body heals faster than trust. By the time my doctors cleared me to return home, my strength had returned enough to climb stairs without resting, to cook simple meals, to smile convincingly when neighbors asked how I was feeling. What they could not see was the quiet machinery turning beneath my calm exterior. Every step I took was measured. Every breath aligned with a plan already in motion. If you sense the shift, if you understand that silence can be strategy, subscribe and stay with me. This is where patience becomes power. Ryan moved into the guest room temporarily, framed as concern, as convenience. Martin barely noticed. He was preoccupied, distracted, already half gone. That absence gave us space. Space to work. Space to act without interference. In the evenings, after Martin retreated to his office for calls, he never explained. Ryan and I spread documents across the dining table like architects revising a flawed design. We began with authority. During my hospitalization, I had signed limited powers of attorney for medical decisions. Quietly, with the guidance of a discreet advisor Ryan trusted, we expanded them. Financial authority, temporary but comprehensive. It required signatures, witnesses, and timing. Timing was our ally. I was recovering. I was vulnerable. No one questioned my need for help. Next came the accounts. Joint savings, investment portfolios, discretionary funds Martin treated as personal. We moved carefully, never draining, never alarming. Transfers were structured, incremental, masked as reallocations for stability during my recovery. Each action was legal, each step documented, each confirmation printed and filed. Ryan suggested the irrevocable account, a structure Martin respected because he used similar ones for clients. Assets placed there could not be reclaimed. Control shifted permanently. We named Ryan as beneficiary under my authority, citing repayment for medical expenses and future care. The language was precise, unassailable. I signed with a steady hand. As the days passed, I felt lighter. Not because money moved, but because truth finally had leverage. Martin continued his routines, unaware that the foundation beneath him was being redesigned. He spoke of a celebratory dinner he wanted to host soon. Family, colleagues. He said it would be good optics. I smiled and agreed, suggesting something elegant, intimate, memorable. Ryan and I exchanged a look across the table that evening. The dinner would be perfect. We prepared the invitation list carefully. Martin's parents, a few trusted associates, and one additional guest, added at the last moment under my name. Martin did not notice. He rarely read details. He assumed control was constant. That assumption would be his undoing. In the final days before the dinner, I reviewed everything once more. Accounts confirmed. Transfers completed. Documentation secured. I slept deeply, peacefully, the steady beat in my chest a reminder that I was no longer living on borrowed time. I was living on chosen terms. The night before the event, Martin kissed my cheek absent-mindedly and said he was proud of how well I had bounced back. I thanked him. I did not tell him that recovery had given me more than health. It had given me clarity. And clarity is dangerous to those who rely on illusion. As I laid out my dress for the evening, a simple black silk that spoke of restraint and authority, I thought of the woman I had been, the one who waited, the one who endured. She would not be attending the dinner. The woman who would walk into that room carried proof, power, and a son who understood loyalty better than any contract. The table was set. The guests were coming. And Martin, unaware, was about to host the most expensive lesson of his life. The dining room glowed exactly as I intended. Candlelight reflected off crystal and polished silver, casting soft halos that made everyone look kinder than they truly were. The table was dressed in understated elegance, linen pressed smooth, florals restrained, the kind of setting that suggested wealth without shouting it. Martin liked to believe taste was proof of character. Tonight, it would be the stage for his collapse. If you've stayed this far, if you're holding your breath with me, subscribe now. What happens in this room cannot be undone. Guests arrived one by one, coats taken, compliments exchanged. Martin moved among them confidently, playing the role he loved best. Gracious host, successful husband, man in control. He introduced me proudly, his hand firm at the small of my back, as if my recovery were a reflection of his generosity. I smiled. I thanked people for coming. No one noticed the stillness in my eyes. Ryan arrived last, dressed simply but impeccably, his presence calm and grounded. Martin greeted him with polite indifference, already dismissing him as an obligation rather than a threat. I watched that dismissal carefully. It would make what followed sharper. Dinner began smoothly. Conversation flowed. Wine was poured. Martin spoke at length about resilience, about the importance of smart decisions during crisis. I listened, amused by the irony, my new heart beating evenly beneath my dress. Halfway through the main course, I cleared my throat gently. The sound carried just enough to quiet the table. I thanked everyone for their support during my illness. I spoke of gratitude, of second chances. Then I said there were truths I could no longer carry alone. Martin turned toward me, smile fixed, confused. I reached into my clutch and placed a small stack of documents on the table, sliding them toward him with deliberate care. I asked him, calmly, to explain the transfers, the hotel bills, the jewelry purchases, the properties leased under shell companies. I said the name of the woman he had hidden so carefully. The room went silent. Martin's face drained of color. He laughed once, weakly, and said it was a misunderstanding. Ryan stood then. Quietly, he placed additional folders beside mine. Bank statements, dates, amounts, everything aligned, he explained, in measured tones, how the funds had been traced, how joint assets had been used, how the refusal to pay for my surgery contrasted sharply with the generosity shown elsewhere. Martin's parents stared at him, disbelief hardening into something colder. One of his colleagues shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of proximity to scandal. The woman Martin had been supporting sat frozen, eyes wide, exposed without a word spoken to her directly. She stood abruptly and left, heels striking the floor like punctuation. Martin reached for my hand. I withdrew it. He began to speak, to explain, to justify. I let him talk until his words tangled, until excuses replaced confidence. Then I told him about the account. The irrevocable one. I told him that the assets he believed untouchable now belonged elsewhere. I told him they had already been transferred. Legally, permanently. He asked how. He demanded to know when. I said during my recovery, while he was busy elsewhere. I said I had learned a great deal about efficiency, about priorities, about waste. The word landed heavily between us. Martin stood, voice raised, eyes frantic. He said I had no right. Ryan corrected him gently. He said everything had been done with authority, with documentation, with foresight. The room felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were listening. Finally, Martin looked at me and begged. The word tasted strange in the air. He asked for forgiveness, for discretion, for time. I looked at the man I had once loved, now reduced to panic, and felt nothing but distance. I told him the marriage was over, that he would leave that night, that lawyers would follow. No one spoke as Martin gathered his coat. His posture collapsed, his authority gone. The door closed behind him with a soft, final sound. I exhaled slowly, the tension leaving my shoulders, my heart steady and sure. As guests departed in stunned silence, Ryan remained by my side. He squeezed my hand once, a quiet affirmation. But as the room emptied and the candles burned low, he leaned toward me and said there was one more thing I needed to know. Something he had not yet told me. Something about my grandfather. About a fortune hidden far beyond anything Martin had touched. And as I looked at my son, I realized the story was not finished yet. Morning came softly, without urgency. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the townhouse, touching the walls I had once curated to impress others and now saw clearly for the first time. The air felt different, lighter, as if the house itself had exhaled after years of holding its breath. I stood barefoot on the hardwood floor, one hand resting over my chest, feeling the steady, confident rhythm that no longer frightened me. This was not borrowed time anymore. This was mine. If this story has meant something to you, if you believe in quiet strength and earned endings, subscribe and stay. This is where everything settles. Martin was gone, not just physically, but structurally. His absence echoed through the rooms he once dominated. No shoes by the door. No clipped phone calls from behind closed doors. No tension humming beneath polite silence. The space felt honest now, stripped of pretense. I packed only what mattered. Clothing I loved. Objects with memory. The rest could wait. Or be sold. Or be forgotten. Ryan made coffee in the kitchen, moving comfortably through the space, as if he had always belonged there. In a way, he had. We sat at the table together, steam rising between us, the city waking beyond the windows. I asked him about my grandfather, about the secret he had mentioned. He smiled, a little sheepish, as if unsure how to begin. He told me my grandfather had been cautious, distrustful of surface wealth. He had built his fortune quietly, through land holdings acquired long before Boston became what it is now. Properties placed in trusts, shielded by layers of anonymity. He had left instructions, conditions. One of them was bloodline recognition without coercion. Another was patience. Ryan explained that years earlier, while searching for his own roots, he had uncovered fragments, names, addresses, records that led back to my family. When he finally connected the dots, the truth stunned him. He had not acted immediately. He waited, watched, learned. When my letter arrived, everything aligned. The fortune had been waiting, not for Martin, not for appearances, for loyalty, for sacrifice, for someone who understood that wealth is a responsibility, not a weapon. My grandfather had known what kind of man Martin was before I ever married him, and he had prepared accordingly. I laughed then, a deep, genuine laugh that surprised us both. Of course he had. Of course, the quietest man in my childhood had seen everything coming. The assets were now Ryan's by right, activated by conditions met through actions, not demands. Saving my life had not been the requirement, it had been the proof. We spent the afternoon meeting with advisors. Calm conversations, clear paths forward. Everything was already in place, requiring only confirmation. Martin's name appeared nowhere. My own appeared briefly, then stepped aside. It felt right. I had never needed ownership. I needed freedom. By evening, I stood on the front steps for the last time, a single suitcase at my side. I looked back at the townhouse that had held so much silence. I did not feel bitterness, only closure. I locked the door and handed the keys to an agent. The chapter closed cleanly, without drama. That was my gift to myself. Ryan drove us out of the city, the skyline shrinking in the rearview mirror. We talked about small things, music, food, the kind of conversations that build bridges quietly. I realized then that legacy is not what you leave behind. It is what you choose to nurture once truth is known. We arrived at a modest house by the water, one I had chosen weeks earlier without knowing why. It felt peaceful, intentional, the kind of place where mornings are unhurried and evenings belong to reflection. As I unpacked, I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. Later that night, I stood on the porch, listening to waves lap gently against the shore. My heart beat strong and sure, a reminder of survival earned through love, not obligation. I thought of the woman I had been, the one who accepted less because she believed it was safer. I honored her quietly, then let her go. Martin would rebuild. Men like him always do. But he would never reclaim what truly mattered. Control, certainty, the narrative that belonged to me now. I am Vivian Kensington. I lived, I learned, and I chose a future defined not by what was taken from me, but by what I finally claimed.